Got a Ryobi weed eater put out on the curb as trash. It appears to be intact. Pull cord is here, spark plug, carburetor, air filter, everything appears to be here. There are fuel lines. They're hard as a rock though. Model number's on the underside and it is RY28140, data manufacturer 121812. First thing I'm going to do, spray a little starting fluid into the carburetor and see if it'll fire up just for a second. Alright, there we go. Pull cord does have issues. Probably needs to be taken apart and lubed up, but it did fire up for a second, so that's a good sign. We have issues with the fuel lines. I have both of those off. You can see this one's falling apart. This is dry rotted. Also, the primer bulb is cracked. You see that tear on top, so that's not going to hold air. That's not going to work. Inside the carburetor, the diaphragm has probably hardened up as well. So let's get the carburetor off, take it apart. Now it should break loose, there it goes, and the throttle cable on the back. So we twist it sideways a little bit. This is a Walbro carburetor model 1059, and it's held together by Phillips head screws on the top and the bottom, and the screws that held this onto the weed eater, those are T20 Torx. So the WT1059 is what will lead me to the correct replacement parts, the primer bulb and the diaphragm kit. There's a diaphragm and gasket. Diaphragm's on top. Should be more flexible than that. Hear that? That's definitely dried out. This should be soft and flexible. I need a new diaphragm kit. I need a new primer bulb. I'm looking through the intake port. This is where the carburetor bolts on, and straight through that hole, that is the piston, and the sides of the piston look nice and smooth, so that's in good shape. I just wanted to make sure that there was no scoring, like if someone ran raw fuel in this weed eater, but I don't see any signs of that at all. I'm going to spray starting fluid in this hole, and then it should fire up for a second, just like it did before. 5 days later, and replacement parts are here. Fuel lines. This tool, I believe, is used to adjust fuel air mixture. And inside of this should be a new carburetor, spark plug. And there went the spark plug. A couple of extra primer bulbs, extra fuel filter, and there's the carburetor. And the reason I bought this kit with a new carburetor is because price-wise, it was the smart thing to do. And also the pull cord, that is fixed. And like I suspected, all it needed was some lubrication, so I just pulled the cord to the side and I could see the sprocket down through the hole, and I sprayed a little WD-40 on either side of it, and now that is good. So we need to get the fuel tank off, clean that out, replace the fuel lines, replace the carburetor, and this thing should run. Holding the tank on, it looks like there are 3 screws here, here, and right in the middle of the plastic, and they're T25 Torx. And that's what's inside the tank. There's also a fuel line in there, got to get that out. Now this thing's been sitting for a long time. This is Purple Power degreaser. On the gas cap right here in the center, I believe that's the vent, so I think that is a filter, and it is nasty. And there's a hole going right through the center, so I have a piece of a coat hanger. I'm going to try to push that filter through. And you can see how dirty it is up there at the top. I tried cleaning this filter with some carb spray, but that did not work very well, so I'm going to try to cut that top piece off, that dirty piece, hopefully without crushing the filter. And that worked. That looks much better. And this little rubber piece came out also, and that goes in first, and there's a hole through that, and I blew carb spray through it just to make sure it was clear, and then the filter goes back in. Put some raw gas in the tank. I'm going to swish that around just to make sure all of the water is out. And a little bit of gas is coming out the top, so that filter is clear. Putting the new carburetor on. It does look like a match. Hopefully this one's going to work. So the bolts through the air filter assembly and a gasket on the back side of that. And this is a new gasket that came with a new carburetor. Now slide the carburetor on and another gasket on this side. Oh, I'm forgetting the throttle cable. I'm going to hook that in. Now we can get the fuel lines. This is the intake, so the line connecting here will have the fuel filter on it, and this will be a longer line. On this one will be a shorter line, and that is to pressurize the tank. That's for the return. And I'm going to cut that fuel line off at an angle. I'm going to cut it to a point. Makes it easier to feed down through that hole. And that is an extremely tight fit, so I'm going to put a little WD-40 on there to try and help it go in a little easier. So I'm just going to work it in little by little. I have that line in far enough that I can grab it with some needle nose pliers. Some more WD-40. That should be enough. I'm going to cut this off square and slide the filter onto the line, and now work the filter back into the tank. Measure out the line so that I can cut it off and slide it onto this lower connection. There's one. Now the return line. Little WD-40, and this only needs to extend into the tank about an inch. And just like this fuel supply line, this is an extremely tight fit, which is what you want because you don't want fuel leaking out around the lines. But being that tight of a fit, it just makes it kind of a pain to get them in there. That is through about an inch, so I'm going to go with that. Let's change out the spark plug, put some fuel in it, crank it up. I see one difference with this new carburetor. This choke lever is spring loaded. On the other one, you could set it to start. This one just pops back up to run. Now that won't make any difference while it's running, but it may make it more difficult to start. It takes 50 to 1. So with this line on the bottom being the intake, when I press the primer bulb, we should see fuel being drawn up through that line and then fuel going out through this line back into the tank. So that's what we want to see. And here it comes. So fuel's going into the carburetor, and now it's coming back out through this line. So that's what we want to see with the carburetor and the fuel lines. Let me put some line on the trimmer head because I don't think there's any on there, and then we'll try to start this up. It's about a week later and it's still running fine. I just wanted to show you one thing with the carburetor. This lever to go between start and run, before it would only go to right here like you saw earlier, and then it would pop back up. It was spring loaded, but now that spring, for whatever reason, it released and I'm able to go between run and start like I should be able to go to. So it's working properly. Again, I'll put a link down below to this carburetor. According to the eBay page where I bought it, it fits over 100 Ryobi and Home Light weed eaters.